Count me down.
Okay, here we are. Here we are. Let's see. We are live, and I'm going to give a few moments here. See, we should start getting some eyeballs, and I'm just going to do a few housekeeping things as we get started. So thank you so much for registering. Thank you also for taking a break and watching the State of Our Union to just relax and think about gardens. And we can all go back to what's going on here in about an hour. But I thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that we can find some peace in the middle of a chaotic day. So as you join us, I just want to remind you of a few housekeeping things. This is being broadcast live on YouTube. You are likely looking at it on my membership site, which is fine. You can totally watch from there, and it'll be a very comfortable experience for you. If you decide that you want to interact with us and ask questions, you do need to go to YouTube, and that's where you would enter your questions or comments into the chat section, but you have to go to YouTube. And now that we're live, if you're on the membership site, you just go down to, where you're seeing us on the screen, just go down to the corner, click the button that says go to YouTube, and then that'll take you to YouTube, and you would make your comments there. If you aren't going to comment, you can stay right where you are and you're going to be fine. You're not going to miss anything. And let's see, is there any other housekeeping thing? I don't think so. I think we're going to jump right in. I wanted to do a quick introduction of my friend, Laura Crockett. And I'm just so pleased to have you as my first guest on something that's kind of a new venture for us to have some conversations with horticultural I'm going to say stars because you're a star in my eyes, and just share with our gardening community. So a little bit about Laura Crockett. Laura Crockett, with her infectious, I'm just going to read her bio. With her infectious and unlimited joie de vivre, Laura Crockett has been designing custom gardens in the Pacific Northwest and California for 25 years. She's the lead designer of Garden Diva Designs, where she practices a unique approach to garden design. Working closely and with integrity, she creates beautiful, functional, one-of-a-kind gardens with her clients. Where her clients can truly connect to themselves and nature. Her work has been featured in many publications, including Pacific Horticultural, Portland Spaces, Horticulture, Garden Design, and so on. Laura has gained a reputation for designing unique garden elements, many of which she credits to the collaborative process she uses with her clients. So welcome so much. Welcome, Laura. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you.
And oops, sorry. Okay, sorry. I don't want to accidentally cut us off, so that would be bad. So Laura, we kind of talked a little bit about what we might cover in this conversation, and I've always been a little bit, right? So that's okay. We're going to have a conversation. I've always been a fan, and you've always been an inspiration to me, and so I'm pleased to have you here. And we've got our first comment here. Stacy Stewart is with us. Stacy, thank you so much for coming. And actually, you know what? Stacy asked us a question via our spreadsheet, and so we might get to that here very shortly. So, but I'd like to talk a little bit about your, whether you have what you might call like a signature style, or what do you think is kind of like the overarching, what would you like people to think about when they think about your design aesthetic and whatnot?
Excellent question. And I can't say that I went into this business with that thought in mind. So it's interesting that you would ask that. The comments that I seem to get from a lot of people who've seen my work is, for some reason, they do see a style there. And
I do.
I struggle sometimes to put a finger on that style name. I do think that I am always looking to create something that's impactful visually.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think that that's probably my overall reaching feel to what I want to accomplish. That being said, every project that I do always reads back to what the client brief is, what they wanted, who they are.
Yeah.
And so it is my job as a designer and a artist, which I tend to put those things together in this head, is that I'm looking to create a signature for that client that is also impactful as well.
Right. So do you have training as an artist, or do you consider yourself mostly self-taught?
Just get on there and get on that horse and ride it till it's dead.
That's right. That's how I approach it as well. So,
you can, one of my favorite lines to myself is to validate what I do, is you can take a piece of junk that you found on the side of the road. If you elevate it 3 inches off the ground, it becomes art. You just need 3 inches and to hold it up, because all of a sudden, then oh my gosh, that piece of garbage has been tipped on its side, and now I look at it, it looks like a cloud formation.
Oh my God, I love that. And actually, that is kind of a perfect segue into one of the things that I really think about when I think about you is your use of materials. It's like if I were to think of a signature style or try to describe that style, I would be coming to color. I would be thinking about materials because you are just, and of course plants, but your mastery of materials is something that I'm always really intrigued by. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your design process from that standpoint, how you go about going from, inspiration to implementation, I guess is one way I would talk about it. And I have several images here that I think are very indicative of some of the materials that I think of when I think of you. And these are some scenes from Laura's garden. And Laura, I can pull up any of the other gardens that you might want to reference if you have any. I'd just like to hear you talk about materials a little bit.
Materials are fun. This comes from I think a long-standing process of me making things from the time I was a kid to now. And I can't say that anyone taught me that, but it is something that continually comes forth as I love those textures from the ground plane. I like to take people's eye, to another texture that might interlace with that, and then move it up and move it to a focal point. So I use texture and shapes and form in material constantly in most of the work that I get to detail. Not every project is detailed. I will say that right out there. There's people that just don't care about that business, and that's fine. Yep. I mean, I got a big old toolbox, and I got all the tools I can take out of there. And if you want those skills, great. If you don't, and you want something super simple, I'm not going to force that on you. But when I do get to layer the garden with texture and plants, and usable space.
Yeah, that's the music, right?
I get pretty excited. There is no doubt. And I mean, I came into the career of being a landscape designer really by being in love with plants.
That's how a lot of us enter.
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Once when I was growing up, I thought Fred Meyer's had the only plants available. And at some point, somebody introduced me. I'll blame it on my sister, actually, who was working for a specialty nursery, and she was doing a lot of deliveries. And so she would come home with these really interesting plants. And I think the first nursery that I hooked into was Joy Creek. And
that's a good one to hook into.
So I toddled. I'm like, where did you get this? I've never seen it before. So I entered that world. You open a door to a world, and all of a sudden your eyes are open to the possibilities, which then to pull those plants into making a space that you can live in outdoors. I'm excited about that.
Yes. So actually, we're getting another question, which is something I was actually thinking I wanted to ask you about. But Stacy is asking us about the material on these fences. And I remember I took this, by the way, this is an old picture of Laura's garden. It was like 2011, but I'm sure that these structures are still there. But Stacy is asking us about that tempered glass. And I think I have a recollection of what that actually is. And it's really interesting. Could you speak to that?
Stacy, thanks for asking that question. It's pretty common to have people inquire about that material. Specifically, it pleases me because originally what I wanted was glass, and unfortunately, my pocketbook wasn't able to sustain that. Yeah. But that is what it's supposed to look like. So I went searching in a budget-minded, conscious way to find a material that I could use that would look like glass. So the thing that I wanted from the glass, which you can kind of see in Darcy's picture, is the ability to see through the garden, that there is something on the other side, intriguing. And yet your eye, as you can see from the beginning or the front of this picture, your eye is stopped on that right-hand side where that container of plant material is. Your eye is kind of stopped there, which I want. But then I like the fact that the glass kind of wiggles the light and refracts it so that you can see that there is a garden on the other side. So it's not a heavy fence. It's a translucent that I really like. So I
can really see that on the left-hand side behind that grassy thing, because, and by the person that's kind of there by the threshold, I can really get a sense of being able to look through that.
And at nighttime, lighting the garden from inside, outside. So the material is not glass. It is a much more inexpensive material, but it does the same trick. So what did I want it to do? What's my budget? And then I have to search around for it. So the ultimate answer to your question is it's a material called double-walled polycarbonate, and it is plastic. So it's 2 layers of thin plastic. You can get it different thicknesses.
Yeah. So kind of it's what some greenhouses are made out of, or ceilings or that sort of thing.
It is a rigid material, so it's actually very usable for a situation like this. I had never seen anyone do it.
Right.
But I had seen ribbed glass, which is what I was going after. The plastic, I don't know if you can enlarge that in your screen or not.
Not so much. Very easily.
It does have those little lines within the plastic. It's actually pretty perfect.
Yes. Yeah. It makes me, so speaking of materials, I'm looking for another image here, while I'm looking for it, I'll just show you this other view of that garden, different time. And the light is different in that one. So that's kind of cool. But I'm looking for another, sorry. Oh, this. When I was looking at this is also in Laura's garden. And I saw I don't know, you can tell me whether I was right on this, but when I was looking at this and when I first saw it, I could see the creative wheels turning, the experimenter, how can I create this space with some repurposed materials and learn something about how I might use those on a larger scale. Because this is a really kind of a small area. So am I onto anything in that observation?
I think you've been in my head a little too much. I don't know how you got there.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh. I mean, just looking at this, so much fun went into making this space. So, you talk a little bit I think one of your questions to me was, what comes first? Are you designing on paper, or what are you actually doing here?
Oh, I think my question was boots on the ground versus pen to paper versus mouse to machine.
Yeah, mouse to machine can tell you, like, oh, there is no question. Laura does not do the mouse thing. I do have friends that do mouse, and I have people who work for me that do the mouse, but I absolutely, I love pen to paper. Love it, love it, love it. There's a definite process there. So the measuring of a site, the putting that site onto a piece of paper where it's just a kind of a blank slate, and your artist brain gets to work about proportions and how you're going to use it. That's fun. But I think for me, the magic also happens when I begin to formulate how those spaces are going to be proportioned, etc., and what shapes I want to use. And usually there's more than one rendition. As you know, Darcy, you do this as well. There might be a roundy version, and there might be a rectilinear version, and you might have something on a 45, and you've got a couple different ways on paper that are interesting. So for me,
and then you mash them together.
Oh, yeah. And it's just like, this is click, 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 click. It's all very interesting. And those of us who work in the industry can easily put ourselves into that design and kind of pretend to be within it. Harder for a client, I'm sure. So what I like to do is I like always to try the design on. So I started this early on when I first got my designer's license, and I started bringing props to the job site. Because I didn't have a computer and I wasn't about to do any sort of three-dimensional thing, but I would put things, I would bring fake trees, I would bring chairs and tables, I would bring fake walls, I would set the space up, I would draw it on the ground with paint. Nobody taught me this. I felt like a total fool doing it, but I learned pretty quickly that clients responded. If you can then put them into the space and let them, and you kind of figure out what you're doing with your piece of paper. Papers are great, but when you put it onto the ground and you can walk a client through it.
Yep, absolutely.
Really, so with this particular, I guess one of the reasons I enjoy looking at this picture and listening to you talk about it, Darcy, is just that there was a design that I decided I wanted, and I laid out the curvature, and I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to make this shaggy kind of a walking space, not easily walkable, but very shaggy and textural. And so with the wall that you see there is kind of a semicircle. It's 18 inches tall, and it drops down, which you can't quite see on the left-hand side of that picture. The design or the arc actually drops down to a pebble band, which continues the shape.
To the left? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, I remember that. And there's a path that goes, isn't there a way to go through the garden right there on the left as well?
Yeah, those are recycled pavers, of course.
Yeah.
And then there's some old concrete conduit in there as well that I broke up and turned on its side. So there's arcs in the garden. Lots of fun going on here. There's a lot of recycled business in there. The wall itself, so in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have a wall. I want that curve. I want to have something I can put people on if there's an overflow of people that need to sit somewhere. So it's a seatable wall. Then I say to myself, what can make it interesting? What elevates it to something that I find amusing? And so what elevated that particular piece is the fact that I put a texture on the front of it that came from when I was at Home Depot looking at I'm going on too long, isn't it? You guys are bored already, right?
Not bored, but I wish I had, the thing is I had a photo, and unfortunately it's hard for me to go in and grab those photos now. But I had a photo of exactly what you're talking about that showed that texture. And I looked at it and I saw like it was expanded metal or something that kind of actually gave it another textural feel. But I don't think we can necessarily see it from here. But I really like how what you're describing is this idea of it's artful yet functional.
Right.
And
absolutely me every single time. I want to make it functional. I want to have it impactful, but then I like bringing that art detail. Like the top of this wall has pebbles and coins that I collected in Hawaii embedded in the top of it. So it's got some found objects in the top. And then the front ends up having a nice texture that came from a piece of plastic that you would put on your fluorescent lighting, you know, those.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Those and put them on the front. I wondered if it would work. And it actually did.
Yeah.
And then the texture also picks up that staircase, which is what you see on the right, that metal.
Yes. I like that a lot. And I remember seeing when I first saw that and it's like, oh yeah, that's just totally brilliant.
People say that.
Yeah, I know. So let's see. So what else about? I'm looking at some of my photos that
are stair treads, Stacey.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, good. Flynn says he's not bored. He says this is really cool. Yay! Thank you, Flynn. So the other kind of things, I'm not sure if we're done with materials necessarily, but this is a little bit of a segue because the other thing that I really noticed and I want to talk with you about is that water seems to be a real constant in your work. And I was wondering if you could say more about that. I have like, it just seems to be present almost all the time. So, and I'll show a few images.
I'm guilty of that.
Yes.
I mean, it's in terms of natural elements and the ability to change it and manipulate it. And when you manipulate it, it moves and the sound is different. There's a reflection quality that can happen using water. It interacts with humans on a biophilic, a lover of nature type of a brain wave, which we really need. It also interacts with nature beautifully. And myself, I think I probably started using it primarily as a natural, like a natural waterscape. And pretty quickly, that came up, that picture that you see there. I was frustrated using typical techniques for creating water features. This is, again, probably 25 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, where you would take a piece of, a rock and you would embed it in concrete and the water would flow over the top of it.
Right. And it just feels like it was done and done and done. And there's nothing wrong with it, but when you're trying to go for something unique, you want to move past that. I get that.
So how do we move past that? So the process is that I was listening to creeks. I would sit in the middle of a creek, and this is something I would do normally anyway. I'm a water kid. But if you sit in the middle of a creek, not a river, but like a real creek, and you start to listen to the echo chambers, I think what I realized was that the magic of that water stream sound is actually the water coursing through the stones. And so there's this gurgling that happens from stone to stone, and it creates this echo that is never the same. It's always changing. And it doesn't become annoying. I mean, you all have noticed that you listen to some water features and you're just like, okay, that's cool. I was drawn to it, but I was drawn to come over and check it out. And now I'm irritated and I'm going to head out the other way because it's just this repetitive, spout, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, there's things you got to work with. So this piece was created in response to that desire to get water to run through stone in a sculptural way.
Yep. So let's pause here and I want to describe to people because it's kind of small on their screen. So the stones, what you may or may not be able to see in this water sculpture is that is steel. So probably a corten or a beam of some sort. And she has, it has cutouts. And then within that tube of steel, if you will, are pebbles that I would say are, they're like small-ish, varying sizes, and that's what she's describing. And when she's talking about the water flowing over those, so the water comes up and down and through these two columns.
Magic. This is the best water feature I ever built, and this is a prototype. It's not even very pretty. I've done several since then. Copied them. Everyone from the Terminix guy that kills the ants once a year to the highest falutinous landscape designer. They love this. Everybody responds to it.
There's just a lot to love about it. So, let's see. I'm gonna pull up a couple of other water ones, and maybe we can talk about this. This is, I think, kind of the pinnacle. This is very Laura to me. I just love that. But this is an entirely different way of using water. And first of all, maybe let's describe what we're seeing so people can kind of wrap their head around it. And my recollection is that where we see this green down at the low, that's kind of still water with a little planting, is right?
Yeah.
And then water is flowing over a piece of glass or acrylic or something like that. Do I have that right?
It is glass, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, say more. I just wanted to make sure people had some sort of sense of what they were looking at. But can you say more about this one? I love it too.
Yeah, get me to shut up. That's the hard part. Okay, so the fun thing about this piece is the picture on the right. Darcy, can you look at that question? I'm not sure what it says there.
We'll do it. I'm going to take it off for the moment, and we'll come back to it because we're talking water. And Flynn, we'll come back to that here in just a moment.
Thanks, Flynn. So the concrete wall is on the right-hand side. It looks like the color of rust, which is this is in my garden.
Yes.
Which is also all around the space, as you've seen before. Right. When you walk into the garden, I wanted a piece of eye candy, something real strong visually to pull you into the front of the garden. And this is the focal point that I created around a $35 piece of recycled glass. I then purchased, I had to interview certain people to create this curved 5 foot tall, it's a little over 5 foot tall concrete poured in place wall.
Yep.
Which then I'm going to stain a couple different colors because, the normal color wasn't good enough for me, and I tried a couple different, and it ends up having this really lovely kind of a leathery texture, like a
I love it.
I love it. I really like that color. I
do too.
Itself, the beauty about this piece for me is that it, again, speaks to how I love to use elements in the garden, which is to say I've got the focal point coming in. Mm-hmm. It's dynamite. That should be just fine, right? But no, if you go around that wall and then you see the picture that's on the left-hand side.
Yes.
It's all about quiet and serenity. That's right. That view that you see there is the one that is in my yoga studio, which is the house side, the room that's off of that. There's a French door, and I can open it up to this.
Yep.
Oh, crazy. Cool.
Yeah. So it's like, so what we're seeing on the right hand is the kind of like, I'm not going to say public. I'm going to say it, but that's not what I mean. But kind of the public view, the more visible view. And then on the left-hand side, what you're seeing is the more private view. And you can really see that you also planted it in a very different way, because the plantings are simple and very serene on the inside, and outside they're more exuberant and textural and commanding of attention. Yeah.
And the other thing that I love about this piece is you talk about inspiration and where does it come from? There's a piece in this wall that comes that had an inspiration. And so I'll share that with you if you've got time. So the right-hand side, of the photo on the right-hand side has a trough of water that goes around. It's custom made around the curve of the wall. So it's holding water. And at nighttime, I have a light that's in that water. And it shines up through the rippling water, and it broadcasts a shadow of light that plays across the front of that wall at night. Okay, so where did it come from? I was swimming laps. It's really cool. I'm swimming laps, because that's my exercise, swimming laps. And I, of course, get caught by the reflection of the light on the wall that was coming in through the windows. And I looked at that reflection and I said, I need to create that somehow.
Yes. Interesting.
So when I made this wall, I specifically needed to have this water trough with the light that would reflect on that wall. So it ticked a lot of boxes for this girl.
Yeah, that's cool and so thoughtful and so like thorough in your process of trying to having that vision and figuring out how to get there. And I think that's one of the things about it, working in our own gardens is that the timetables are a little different. The freedom to kind of say, I have this vision, I have this idea, and I'm going to go for it.
Right.
Is really liberating, isn't it?
It is, because when I live in the pole side of town of Hillsboro, nobody does the kind of things that I do. And in terms of spending money on their house, and I can tell you how many contractors came out to bid that. And they really literally just said, honey, you can't afford this. Like, I can't afford.
Interesting.
So I always compare this to, like, some people have boats. They have motor boats, and they take those things out on the water, and they're like $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, and then they dump gasoline in them. This was so cheap.
Yeah, that's right. It is. Yes, I am with you.
So do it. If you've got a good idea, do it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Water everywhere. There's just so many cool water features. But let's jump to Flynn's question and make sure we get that answered. And Flynn is asking, how do you go about using cool but large found materials? Do you have them on hand or look for them after seeing a site, or are you aware of certain things being available? Oh, that's good. Asking as a design student. So I think that's an excellent question, because it's like this chicken or egg, it's like,
it all depends on what your resource pool is. Earlier this year, I was invited out to a burning project by one of my logger friends.
I think I saw that on your Instagram feed. That's really cool. Yes.
So and Flynn, you probably have been out in nature as well, and you come across an old fallen log, and the root ball is tipped up, and nature has made a garden within that root ball, and you're fascinated by it. I'll bet you money. The same experience I do. So I was out on this this job site with Chris Clutch is his name, and he was pulling up. He was working for somebody else, but he was logging this property, and he said, "You got to come out and see these stumps because they're just crazy amazing." And that's exactly what I did. I drove all the way, 2 hours out there to take a look at what he was doing, and in the middle of nowhere. And and I'll tell you, I had trouble because I wasn't sure how I could get those cool sculptural pieces to a project. And so it's way out of my league. To be honest with you, I could hire a logger to do that. It's not inconceivable. The problem was I didn't have a client. And
yes, I hear you.
Always the problem. I was like, I got this cool idea. Now I need a client. So as a design student, I will speak to you for a second about that. And that is, get yourself a notebook or a file drawer of ideas, because you'll have ideas. You got to sketch them out as clear as they will come to you. And I'm a sketcher. Maybe you're a computer person, but sketch them out. tick the boxes in there. What do you want to accomplish with creating this? And then take that item that it's a gem. That's a pool of inspiration. That's a gem you need to keep, Flynn, and put it in your file drawer, because I guarantee you, if you're ready for it, someday that client will come along. And your idea will be there. I've taken things. I got a file drawer.
So so inquiring minds want to know, have we found a home for those stumps? Are we on the hunt today? Is anybody out there that's listening going to help Laura use these stumps?
I do need a client, because it's a big.
Oh, it'd be a big production.
It's
very
a
big
undertaking. And people are out there, and it'll come along. But so how do you go about using cool found materials? It's always a problem, especially when they're oversized. You've got to get somebody under your belt that you can make a phone call to and ask if they can help you gather these materials. And if you have some property, a little bit of property, you could come to my house and see what I've got. But I mean, it's a little bit wacky if you're a collector of weird things, because you have to grab them when you can. Most of them are recycled. They're garbage. They're going to get dumped. I've found things at TriMet bus stops. I've found things at old nurseries, crumpled tree cages that were garbage. They're in the garbage pile. And I, looked at them and I said, I can paint that and put a plant in it and hang it on a wall. And guess what? It's 3 inches off the ground.
Yes. Love it. Love it.
It's a problem. I get that.
Yeah. That's a really interesting question, Flynn. Thanks for bringing that up, because I think it's interesting to talk about. I want to, in a moment, make sure that we have time to talk about this whole collaborative process that I know is really central to you. But we have a question here from Deborah, and she's asking, what is the black grass on the right and what is in front of it? And I think she's talking about the image right here in front of us. So
yeah, that should be on Darcy's home site, shouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, what are you talking? Both of those plants? Yes. I know what those plants are.
That's like a Darcy thing right there.
I know, it's a beautiful vignette, and I know what the plants are. But do you want to spill the beans? Spill the beans for Deborah.
So the black one is called black mondo grass. And if you Google that, you'll get the botanic name. It's
and that is on the eGardenGo site. It's Ophiopogon nigrescens, but black mondo grass will get you it, and that's included.
The blue plant is called. I don't actually know the common name, which is typical for me.
Yeah.
But it starts with a C. Crambe. Crambe. That's its first name. And its middle name is Maritima.
I put that in the comments for people so you can see it.
Okay.
Also, I think people call that sea kale or something like that. Or
it reminds me of the old 1970s tuxedo shirt that guys used to have, the big ruffles. I think it's terribly tacky. And
in summer, it gets these kind of very tall, ivory, airy kind of blooms that kind of float over it. That's at least I grow that in my parking strip as well.
Yes. And it likes to grow in gravelly soil. It is a perennial, so it dies back. Right now, it's completely dormant. You don't see it at all, but you do see the black mondo grass, which is, again, this is kind of a typical planting scheme of mine. I'll have sometimes 2/3 plant material is present. That doesn't mean that it doesn't change through the year, but it's present, usually 2/3. And then about 1/3 is ephemeral, where it comes up and it comes down, or I will probably have some allium come up in that grouping as well. The purple.
I could definitely see that. That would,
and then it disappears. So there's the beauty about creating gardens, sculptural gardens that are something that people enjoy through the year, is that it's constantly changing. It does require some hands-on. They don't happen by themselves. Beautiful gardens will revert back to
chaos.
And, everybody has a different form of chaos. I have different areas on my property that some areas I let go until it absolutely has to have maintenance. Other areas I keep a little bit tidier.
Yeah, cool.
Down.
So there is another question that I want to make sure we circle back to. And I think since we're kind of talking plants right now, let's do it now. And I'm going to pull up some images from one of your projects that Stacy asked. She says, your plantings for Westwind Farm Studio are fabulous. Are these plantings watered in summer?
That's an old project.
Yeah.
There are
or if you did something similar, what was your intent when you
the intention is not to water. However, there is a couple years in the beginning where you do need to supplemental water. And again, there's different areas on that property where watering is required and other areas where it just doesn't happen at all and nature takes over. And that's part of the beauty. That's part of the art of that garden. It is ever changing. The client has, Westwind Farms has moved on to working with, I think, Peter Greenlee, doing a lot more meadow garden.
Yep. I remember that.
It was really, really what she loved. And is a magical place, a really magical place. But it was a wonderful project to get in on. I got to be a part of that as she used to call us the dream team. I was working with Ann Lovejoy and Eamon Hughes on the water feature. And the client himself, Mike McCulloch, is an architect and orchestrated so many things on that project. It was a real treat to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's an amazing space, and I have the images I'm cycling through here are some that I took. I guess this was also in 2011, but there are more of this project on in Laura's portfolio on House, so you can check that out. But
I had to be a part.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was great to be a part of it.
Yeah. So as an add-on to that, Stacy also asked what your favorite resources are for learning which drought-tolerant plants are suitable for our area.
I will say that if you can become curious and become a researcher, I would say use your nurseryman as much as possible. They will oftentimes tell you, and I don't mean retail nursery, I mean the people that are the growers.
Yeah, so like the Joy Creeks, the Zira.
Exactly, the Ziras, the Joy Creeks. Heronswood is where I cut my teeth back in the day. I don't know if you guys know Heronswood, but they're up in the San Juan Islands. Fabulous, incredible collector's nursery. And when I became infatuated years ago, it was still kind of a young nursery, and you could actually take classes up there. You would have lunch with Dan Hinckley in his house, eating at his table. And that's
good Lord.
Just getting to know nurserymen who are growing the plants and also the people that work for them. Huge resource pool. And
we are really blessed in the Northwest with so much knowledge and so much willingness to share. It's really, really incredible.
And everybody wants to help.
Yeah.
I think one of my biggest irritations is the over marketing of plants. And Darcy talks about that with trending. I get irritated as a garden designer who has to not only buy the plant, install the plant, tell the client how to, take care of it, come back years later, find that it's died or it's spread, whereas the nurseryman said, no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Yep.
I don't like it when people force plants because it's the newest and greatest thing. That's my biggest irritation.
That's right.
In this business.
Yeah. I have written on the blog before about this kind of, just respect for the common plant. They're common for good reason. It's because they're reliable, they're consistent, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with using common plants. The trick is to use them in uncommon and interesting ways. And that's our challenge, right? That's what we need to do, is that, create, these interesting compositions that aren't going to melt away because the plant hasn't been properly tested.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, it's great. I have worked so much with plant collector type clients, and they're a huge blessing because I also learn through designing their space with them.
Yes.
I can only afford so many plants, and I can only grow so many things at my house. And so it's a treat to be a designer and be able to work with people like Westwind Farms or some of my other favorite clients that are real, true plant collectors, because it just is unending what we can do with plants.
Yes. And then also, because they're a collector, there is a certain there's an understanding of what they're getting into, and that there is an imprecision. Hardscape is precise, plants are imprecise, but that is also what makes it so delightful and so fun, as that experimentation, the evolution, the change over time.
Right. And I will say, I did come into this with the love of plants, but I quickly realized that the more hardscape I have, the more plants I can actually show off against hardscape. And I think that is what really feeds my, one of the things that feeds my love of creating intricate spaces using different.
Oh no. Uh-oh. Looks like hopefully she will log back on. So we've lost Laura, but yikes. So I'm going to, while she's doing that, I'm just going to, I'm hoping that she'll return back here. See if there's any other questions that we had there. And I guess while I have you and while we're waiting for Laura to return, I'll remind you that if you're having a good time with this talk, we are also having on next Tuesday, the 19th, Sean Hogan and Kate Bowden, who are instrumental in the effort to get the Portland Botanical Garden started, are going to be guests, and we're going to have a conversation similar to this. And I'm really looking forward to learning more about that. Why don't we go, and I'm going to look through a couple of Laura's projects and have, oh, you know what? When we were talking, this is the photo that I didn't think I had. This is the materials where you can see early on in our conversation, we were talking about this wall. This is that other view. And she said that she got that texture on there with using a fluorescent light. So if you just can get in there and see that, it's got this pebbly texture, and you can really see those the expanded metal stairs there. So let me go through and look at the other thing that I think of sometimes is, and I had this one, I was getting ready to ask Laura about this, is that I really hope that she can get back on here, because I want to talk about her collaborative process, which I know is really important to her, and that a lot of the projects that we look at are a result of that. And she kind of talked about that with the Westwind Farm. She talked about the dream team that she had. And here we go. She's back. Yay.
I don't know what that was about. That's why I don't do computers, Darcy.
Well, I am glad you made it back on, because I was trying to wing it. Because the one thing I really want to talk about next is, before we run out of time, we're going to try and keep this to about an hour, maybe a smidge over. But I'm hoping you can say more about this idea of collaboration, because I know it's something that you really feel very strongly about. And so let me just get out of the way and let you talk about that for a little bit. Or I can ask you another question. Like,
no, I think that I'm not sure what you would like me to give you in terms of collaboration. Is it important to me? Absolutely. I can tell you that when I become curious about the things that we can accomplish in a landscape, I will typically look to the clients and use my brain and it's really an observation. Sometimes you have to engage with the client on a personal level in order to begin to formulate specific elements that are going to resonate with them.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I was wondering about is that, there is art often in these spaces. And when I think about collaboration, that's definitely part of it, right? You think about who are the people that have an artistic sensibility that might be a good match for this client, this project, and how can I make that connection? Maybe you're making the connection, maybe they're bringing it in, but all in all, that is part of that collaborative process where, this rug here that's so beautiful there on the right, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that you did that mosaic work. I'm sure you could have, but I'm saying, but that is so central to this project, and it was planned, and it's very integrated, and that's what when I think about the collaborative process, I think about the art, I think about some of the structures, and thinking about how those get built and implemented.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun for me. It's really fun for me to look at these pictures with you and be able to verbalize some of the fun things that happened there. I can tell you that all the special gardens that I've been able to be a part of, my favorite ones are always collaborative. Working with a client that is really invested in creating something amazing and unique. And I have always found that humans are pretty amazing.
Yes.
But with this particular piece that we're looking at, that rug, in terms of relating how that relates to design, Flynn might be interested in this, but when I am on paper planning a garden, just like I did with my own front yard, I knew I wanted a focal point in a certain location. I wasn't going to name that focal point because that's kind of dangerous in the beginning. To put you into a box, right, Darcy?
Right.
So this particular rug that you see here on the right is in front of a beautiful fireplace that's also has water nearby.
Yes.
There's a big leaf that is a gunnera leaf that drips just this delicious bit of moisture and water into a plant trough, which then is also attached to a flame because the client wanted water and flame at the same time, which I have a whole nother design for that, by the way, which didn't get used. So I need another client for that.
Looking for another client.
I can't wait to do that. Okay, but the rug had a place mark. So we decided as the client and designer team that there would be a mosaic of some sort. There would be something special within the hardscape in that location. Did not have a person's name attached to it. Did not have an artist's name attached to it at that time.
Right.
So in this particular garden, I can probably point to several different areas where I wanted specific things to have occur. There's a little bit of the picture here. There's 2 stone columns in some Sarracenas, the bog plant that you see there on the steps.
Yeah.
2 stone columns within that. And I had a vision in my head of these amazing hand-carved Balinese type stone columns. Just a concept. Didn't know where it was going to come from. Had no clue whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, we bought some stone columns. And there was this huge story about getting them there. And the people who brought them ended up cracking it in half.
Oh my
gosh. We had to repair it and put it back up. And then No sooner had we put it back up, but a huge windstorm comes through and it fell down on the concrete, and it was the end. And so this is like set number 2, which they happened to find down in California. And we're texting, he's always texting me, what do you think about this? And my rule of thumb is if he's somewhere shopping and he finds something super cool, I always tell him we need 2 places to put it. So if it doesn't work in one place, then it'll probably work in the other. That's our rule of thumb. And if he really truly loves it, oh yeah, isn't that cool?
This is from your portfolio site, and so maybe I'll use images from here for the rest of our talk. Yeah, this is an amazing garden.
Oh, perfect.
And that's the fire pit that Laura was. There's an even better one. Water and fire together, and ambiance. Beautiful, beautiful place to hang out at night.
Ticks all the boxes.
Yes, it does. Art everywhere, and places for people.
So this particular structure was a collaboration of people, artists. Thanks, Flynn. What you probably may not notice, there's a couple of things here that I brought to the table, but there's a post in the back that is a steel post. And I love this story. You probably don't have a close-up of it, but I'll tell the story anyway, because it's interesting to me. In terms of like, where do ideas come from? Everybody wants to know that. Where do they come from? And so those poles are steel that are in the back that are actually holding up the
that look like timber bamboo.
No, the timber bamboo is there, but when the one
I see
is an actual tubular steel, and then there's a steel framework. But this posts themselves, I had a crazy idea of something. It's functional, but how can I elevate it to the next level? So what I had in my head was a image that I got at a playground when my kid was little, and I'm bored to tears as he's swinging on the play, bored to tears, la, 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 being a mom. And the play structure was made out of steel, and it had been painted multiple times over the years, and it had worn down. And I was fascinated by how it was worn down. And I found that to be really artistic. And it reminded me of a crayon that I used to have, like a block crayon when I was about 8, that had like a million different colors in it. And it was fascinating. And really nature had, man had made something, but yet nature had worn it down, and then it became art. So I wanted to experiment with those poles, those steel structures. And I asked the client if they had any, if they would mind if I did that. I showed him a picture of the swing set at the playground that was made out of steel. I said, I think we can recreate this in your colors that suit your garden, that will then be the support of this beautiful structure. And they said, sure, go for it, Laura. So we did, and we ended up, me and the craftsman and I, he helped me out considerably. And in his studio, I chose the colors of paint, and we layered on 6 different colors of paint on these posts and then sanded them down so that we ended up with this really interesting color collage on a steel post. Never seen anybody do it.
Yeah.
But it was.
Yeah, I wish we had a photo where we could see that better, but it's almost like, it makes me think of your concrete wall out front, how it's layered in color, and it's difficult. I mean, so what you're getting is the richness and complexity and the passage of time, and you can't really recreate that, because it was a process of many layers. And so that's kind of cool.
It's definitely one of a kind art, and yet there's a longevity to it. That chandelier that you see in that past picture as well was a collaboration with Gina Nash, who's a local artist. And I brought the idea to her. This is back to your question of who do you find these people? So the idea was to create a chandelier where the fronds were upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And that was essentially the chandelier. And Craig knew somebody that would make that for us. And we found her at one of the garden shows, the Seattle Garden Show, up in the what do they call that area where they sell everything?
The marketplace.
Marketplace. So we happened to look for her. Oh my gosh, we found her. I sketched it out that day in the market booth with her. She lit on fire. She totally got it. And then she took it to the next level, which is that she brought her art into it. And these are all her own hand drawings that she sketched out on paper and we all talked about. And then there's going to be little crystals in there as well that are like the dewdrops of water. But the cool thing is I came up with it and was able to relay the feeling and what we wanted. But then you have to, as a designer, you have to stand back, let the next artist do their magic, and then bring it to the client as a piece. So that's, to me, the best collaboration right there. It's very, very important not to control everything.
It's like you have to focus on the goal, not your ego. Like, oh, I created this thing. It's really not about that. It's about creating together and getting where you want to go.
I find it so exciting, though, to think that, you know, you walk into this, many people have walked into that garden and seen that piece. And it's fun to know that it came from here. I'm like the only person who knows that. I'm the only one that knows the whole story from beginning to end. Yeah. And, you know, most people who go to that garden and a lot of my gardens, they look around and they think that the client did everything. And I'll tell you what.
Not the case, huh?
It's absolutely okay. And I think that, you know, they're the ones ultimately that gave me permission to even be a part of it. And by that token, it is theirs. And you know, taking your ego out of it and just having a hella good time is kind of what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see if we've got, we have I think that we probably should try and keep it at about an hour, but this was so fun. I'm scanning
forever.
I am scanning here. Just make sure we haven't missed any questions. There is one that I'll respond and you can jump into. It's a question from, they're thinking about inviting a designer back to consult on a project they did for me years ago. Should I expect them to charge a consulting fee? I think yes. Most garden designers like Laura and I, we are basically paid for our time. So if it depends on what your agreement with them was, but I think that yes, you should expect to pay their current consulting fee. Laura, anything to add on that?
No, I mean, I don't. I guess I understand that maybe we don't know why she's having her back, but sometimes if there's a problem or something like that, it's
that's a different thing.
Yeah. And honestly, you know, throw them an email. They'll tell you what they want to do. Some people are dying for work, or they just want to see you again.
That's right.
And they'd be happy to do it considering it's a slow time of year. So
yeah. Sometimes it's like you do want to go back and see your projects, and it is a little sticky and slippery, right? Where, you know, obviously if you're going to go back and you're going to see a project, you're going to want to talk about it. And you're going to want to try and that you're going to have observations that may have value for that person and whatnot. So, but generally speaking, designers do need to be compensated for their time. So.
Yeah, we have a different business model than, say, a landscape contractor who's got crews of people out there, you know, with a shovel. A guy with a shovel right now is $50 an hour to $75 an hour. I mean,
right. And you got to get in line. And you got to get in line, right? It's really hard to get work scheduled right now.
Yeah, So I consider the fees that the designers in this area are charging are well worth it. But it is something that you should ask them via email. Tell them you don't want to insult them. This is what you're thinking. If you don't want to pay their fee at all, then, you know, maybe you can send them a picture and they're willing to look at it online. So that's another thought.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we should probably sign off. Laura, thank you so much for joining me today. And then I guess I'm just going to give a little bit of a plug before we sign off and just remind you all that this was brought to you by eGardenGo. eGardenGo.com is a website that is a database and a clearinghouse, not a clearinghouse, but a database of planting combinations that you can search through. It's full of ideas and inspiration, and I hope that you'll join me there. And since you're here today, I have your email, so I will be in touch. So, and we'll be doing events like this again. And any feedback I would just love to have. I'd like to know whether, just any feedback that you want to provide about how this process went for you. I'm all ears, and I hope that we can have Laura back again sometime soon.
Oh, sure.
So,
anytime.
All right. Well, thank you all, and we'll see you next time. So.